I want to begin by being careful about my own title, because the West is sleepwalking into economic irrelevance is a phrase with a word in it that I do not actually endorse, and I want to remove that word before I say anything else, because building on it would be dishonest. The word is irrelevance. The West is not heading toward irrelevance. I want to say that plainly and at the outset because it is the declinist overclaim that I have been careful to avoid across all my thinking, and I am not going to adopt it now. The West, and I mean this genuinely, retains enormous and durable strengths, the deepest capital markets in the world, an extraordinary innovation ecosystem, a genuine and leading position at the frontier of the most transformative technology of the age, a culture of entrepreneurship and iteration that no other system consistently matches, and these strengths are real and they are not going away, and they will continue to generate genuine economic value regardless of any pressure. So irrelevance is the wrong word, an overclaim, and I reject it. What I do not reject, and what I actually want to talk about, is the other word in the title, the word that carries the real meaning, which is sleepwalking. Because while the West is not heading toward irrelevance, it is, in a specific and important sense, sleepwalking, moving through a genuine structural shift with a striking lack of collective awareness, and the thumbnail phrase captures the real situation exactly, that the alarm is ringing and the sleepwalker does not wake. That is the subject. Not irrelevance, which is a false endpoint, but sleepwalking, which is a real condition, the condition of moving through a shift without consciousness of it. Let me be careful, as always, about the two extremes, because this subject pulls people hard toward one of them, and both are wrong, and here the danger of the declinist extreme is especially real given the title. The first extreme is the declinist doom, the reading of sleepwalking into irrelevance as a story of Western collapse and defeat, the West finished, overtaken, made irrelevant, and this is wrong. Badly wrong? Both because it ignores the genuine and durable strengths that make irrelevance a fantasy, and because it imports a defeatism that is as useless as it is inaccurate. And the second extreme is the comfortable dismissal, the insistence that everything is fine, that there is no shift underway, that the concerns are the same overblown anxieties that always circulate, and that the sensible posture is simply to relax. This is the more common error, and it is more dangerous, because it is precisely the sleepwalking, the surface normalcy that conceals the unconsciousness, the functioning fine, that hides the failure to register the shift. The truth is neither collapse nor complacency. The truth is that the West is not heading toward irrelevance, but is moving through a genuine shift without adequate awareness of it, sleepwalking, and the risk is not irrelevance, but the squandering of genuine advantages through unconsciousness. And the interesting and useful thing is the nature of the sleepwalking itself and what waking would require. So let me develop what sleepwalking actually is, because the metaphor is precise and everything depends on understanding it correctly. A sleepwalker is functioning. This is the crucial and counterintuitive thing. The sleepwalker moves, walks, sometimes performs complex actions, appears from the outside to be functioning normally, and yet is not conscious, not aware of what they're doing or where they're going. And this is exactly why collective sleepwalking is so difficult to perceive and so dangerous. Because a society that is sleepwalking is functioning fine on the surface. The markets are open, the institutions are operating, life proceeds in its recognizable forms, the prosperity is still present, the system's still working, the ordinary business of the economy still transacting. And this surface normality is precisely what conceals the unconsciousness, because we expect a society in trouble to look like a society in crisis, to show the visible signs of distress. And a sleepwalking society shows none of them. It looks entirely normal. It functions. And the functioning is exactly what hides the fact that it is moving without awareness. Through a shift, it is not consciously registering. Sleepwalking does not look like crisis. It looks like normalcy. And that is what makes it so hard to see and so dangerous to be in, because the very normality that reassures everyone is the surface beneath which the unconscious movement is occurring. The principles that determine how to become genuinely conscious of a structural shift, how to wake to a reality that the surface normality conceals rather than sleepwalking through it, are worth studying deliberately and as a connected whole. And there is a body of work that lays them out carefully called the Naval Codex. It is not a forecast and it is not a set of tactics. It is a systematic account of the underlying principles that determine who becomes conscious of structural reality and responds to it, who wakes rather than sleepwalks, rather than moving through a shift with the unconsciousness that surface normality permits. If you want to engage with those principles directly, it is linked in the description, and there's a code on the screen you can scan to reach it. And engaging with the principles directly is what matters, because the capacity to wake to a shift generalizes far beyond any single one, and the shifts it applies to will always be different. Now let me develop the most important thing about the metaphor. The thing captured in the alarm is ringing, and the sleepwalker does not wake, because it explains why all the warnings and all the data and all the arguments do not produce awakening. Here is the crucial insight. An alarm does not wake a sleepwalker. External signals, warnings, sounds do not reliably wake a person who is sleepwalking, because sleepwalking is precisely the state of not registering external signals in the normal way. The alarm rings and the sleepwalker walks on, either not hearing it at all or incorporating the sound into the dream, folding it into the unconscious narrative and continuing to move. And this is exactly what is happening with the structural shift. The alarm is ringing. The signals are present, abundant, available. The fiscal numbers and the monetary dynamics and the redistribution of capability and the technological transition, all of it visible, all of it warned about, all of it there to be registered. And the collective sleepwalks on, functioning normally, not registering, because the sleepwalking collective does not register the alarm in the way that would wake it. It hears the warnings and dismisses them, folds them into the comfortable narrative, explains them away, incorporates them into the dream of surface normality, and walks on. This is why the ringing alarm is not enough. This is why all the data and all the arguments and all the warnings do not produce the awakening. Because you cannot wake a sleepwalker with an alarm, and a collective that is sleepwalking through a shift does not wake, because the signals are loud enough, because loudness is not what wakes a sleepwalker. And the alarm, however loud, rings unheeded while the collective walks on. Let me be specific about what the West is sleepwalking through, because the abstraction needs concrete content. It is sleepwalking through a genuine structural shift with several dimensions, each of which has its alarm ringing. The fiscal and monetary pressures, the trajectory of the debt and the erosion of the currency, with the alarm ringing and the public numbers and the collective walking on, holding wealth in the eroding currency, not registering. The redistribution of productive capability, the accumulation of genuine industrial and technological capacity elsewhere, with the alarm ringing in the visible reality and the collective walking on, still assuming a permanence that the shift is quietly undoing. The technological transition, the reshaping of the productivity of every domain, with the alarm ringing in the trajectory and the collective walking on, still assuming that the familiar arrangements will persist. These are real, and the alarm is ringing on all of them, and the collective sleepwalks, functioning normally, not registering. Not irrelevance, because the strengths remain, but a real shift being moved through unconsciously, which is a genuine risk, not because it leads to irrelevance, but because a shift moved through unconsciously is a shift not consciously responded to. And the genuine advantages that could be marshaled in a conscious response go unmarshaled while the sleepwalking continues. Let me focus on the dimension that bears most directly on how you are positioned, which is the monetary one, because it is perhaps the clearest example of the sleepwalking, of the alarm ringing unheeded. The West, broadly, sleepwalks through the monetary erosion. The alarm is ringing loudly in the fiscal numbers and the monetary dynamics and the persistent dilution of the currency, and the collective walks on, holding wealth in the eroding currency, assuming its permanence, not registering the erosion that the alarm is announcing. And this sleepwalking through the monetary shift is not harmless. because the person who sleepwalks through the erosion, holding their wealth in the diluting currency without registering the dilution, is being quietly diminished, their real position deteriorating while they walk on unconscious, reassured by the surface normality of a number in an account that does not fall even as its real value declines. The monetary sleepwalking is the clearest case. The alarm ringing in the public data and the collective walking on, not registering, because the erosion is gradual and produces no dramatic signal, and the surface normality conceals it. The way capital actually moves as a monetary shift proceeds beneath the surface normality, where it flows and why, and what happens to those who sleepwalk through the erosion versus those who woke to it and repositioned, is worth understanding in its specific mechanics rather than in vague outline. And there's a framework that traces exactly this, called the dragon pivot. Despite the name, it is not really about any single country. It is about how monetary transitions unfold beneath the surface normality that conceals them, how the alarm rings unheeded, and how those who woke to the shift positioned themselves before it became undeniable. You can reach it through the code shown on the screen or through the link in the description for anyone who wants the fuller picture. And that picture matters here precisely because the monetary shift is the clearest example of a reality the collective is sleepwalking through, the alarm ringing in the public numbers while the collective walks on. Now I want to come to the most important turn, the thing about what waking actually requires, because it is genuinely liberating once you see it, and it follows directly from the metaphor. If an alarm does not wake a sleepwalker, then what does? And the answer is that waking comes from within. You cannot wake a sleepwalker reliably from outside with an external signal, because sleepwalking is the state of not registering external signals. Waking is an internal act, a shift in the state of consciousness itself, a coming to awareness that happens from within rather than being imposed from without. And this has a crucial consequence for the collective. A collective cannot be woken from outside, cannot be roused by an alarm, however loud, because a sleepwalking collective does not register the alarm in the way that would wake it. But the individual can wake. The individual can perform the internal act of coming to consciousness, of choosing to register what the sleepwalking state dismisses, of waking from within while the collective sleepwalks on. And this is the whole liberation of the metaphor. You cannot wake the West, and waiting for it to wake is futile, because a collective does not wake to an alarm. But you can wake yourself, become conscious of the shift while the collective sleepwalks, and this is entirely within your power, because waking is an internal act available to any individual willing to perform it, regardless of whether the collective around them remains asleep. And the individual who wakes while the collective sleepwalks is unusually positioned, and this is the practical heart of it, because consciousness is the prerequisite for any response. You cannot respond to a shift you are not conscious of, cannot prepare for what you are sleepwalking through, cannot reposition for a reality you are not registering. And so the individual who wakes, who becomes conscious of the shift the collective is moving through unconsciously, gains the one thing that the sleepwalking collective lacks, the awareness that makes response possible, and with it, the ability to reposition, to prepare, to act on the consciously registered reality while the collective walks on. Waking for the individual means registering the signals the collective dismisses, becoming conscious of the shift, and acting on that consciousness, which in practical terms means repositioning based on the reality you have woken to rather than the surface normality the collective is sleepwalking through. The work of building a position based on the consciously registered reality of the shift, grounded in genuine productive capability rather than in the surface normality the collective sleepwalks through, is worth doing systematically once you have woken, and there is a framework devoted precisely to that called the Sovereign Vault. It is concerned with building durable, generationally significant wealth, grounded in real productive assets and real institutional protection, the kind of position that follows from waking to the shift rather than sleepwalking through it, rather than in the fragile arrangements that the surface normality reassures the sleepwalker are safe. It is linked below, and the code on the screen will take you straight to it for anyone who wants to go deeper on the question of how the individual who has woken actually positions themselves. And that is the practical core of it. Because waking means little if you do not act on the consciousness, if you register the shift and then continue to hold the position the surface normality made comfortable. I want to spend real time on the even-handedness, because it is where the honesty of the reflection is tested, and because the title's overclaim makes it especially necessary. The West is not heading toward irrelevance, and I want to develop this substantially rather than as a token gesture. The genuine strengths are real and durable and enormous. The capital market's the deepest and most liquid in the world, channeling capital to productive investment with an efficiency no other system matches. The innovation ecosystem, the combination of research universities and technology companies and venture capital, and the cultural tolerance for failure that produces genuine breakthroughs. The leading position at the frontier of the most transformative technology of the age, in the frontier research and the concentration of elite talent and the culture of ambition. The entrepreneurial dynamism that no other system consistently reproduces. These are not going away, and the sleepwalking does not erase them, and this is exactly why irrelevance is the wrong word. The risk of the sleepwalking is not irrelevance, it is the squandering of these genuine advantages, the failure to consciously marshal them in response to real pressures, because the pressures are not being consciously registered. And even that squandering is not destiny, because a society can wake, and history includes many awakenings, many instances of societies that appeared to be sleepwalking, reasserting genuine conscious ambition in response to pressure recognized in time. So the picture is not the West is finished. It is the West has genuine strengths and is moving through a real shift without adequate awareness of it. And the risk is the unconscious squandering of the strengths rather than any inevitable irrelevance. And the sleepwalking is reversible, at least for the individual, and perhaps given a genuine awakening for the collective as well. I want to think honestly about why societies and individuals sleepwalk, why the alarm rings unheeded, because understanding the mechanism is the only defense against it. The first reason is the comfort of the surface normalcy, the fact that a sleepwalking society is functioning fine on the surface so that everything reassures the market's open and the system's working and the prosperity present. And this surface reassurance is precisely what permits the unconsciousness, because there is no visible crisis to force the awakening. The second reason is that a gradual shift produces no dramatic signal, no single moment loud enough to wake even a conscious observer, so that the shift proceeds beneath the threshold that would trigger awakening, incremental and continuous and never quite forcing the eyes open. The third reason is the peculiar comfort of the dream over the waking, that the sleepwalker, in a sense, prefers the dream, the comfortable narrative of permanence and normality, to the disorienting act of waking to a reality that would demand response. And this preference for the dream keeps the alarm unheeded, because waking is uncomfortable and the dream is comfortable and the mind reaches for the comfort. And the fourth reason, specific to the collective, is that a collective sleepwalks even more persistently than an individual, because waking a collective would require not one person but the whole society to come to consciousness at once. And the collective consciousness is far harder to shift than any individuals, so that even the individuals who wake find themselves surrounded by a collective that walks on, and the pressure to rejoin the comfortable collective dream is strong. These reasons, the surface comfort and the gradualness and the preference for the dream and the persistence of the collective, together explain why the alarm rings and the sleepwalker does not wake, and why the sleepwalking continues even as the signals grow louder. I want to be very clear one final time about what I am not saying, because the misreadings here are dangerous and I want to foreclose them. Sleepwalking into irrelevance is not, in my hands, a claim of Western collapse or irrelevance, and I reject the word irrelevance explicitly because the West's genuine strengths make it a fantasy. And it is not China triumphalism, and it is not a prediction of Western defeat, because the risk is the squandering of genuine advantages through unconsciousness, not any inevitable overtaking. And it is not essentialism, not a claim about any people. It is a claim about a collective state of awareness. And the alarm is ringing is not a counsel of panic. because waking is not alarm. Waking is calm consciousness. The quiet coming to awareness of the reality beneath the surface normality, and the individual who wakes does not panic, but positions calmly and consciously. And the whole thing is reversible, at least for the individual and perhaps for the collective, because waking is always possible, and a sleepwalking society can come to consciousness in response to pressure recognized in time. So I want to end, as I always do, not with an exhortation, but with an invitation to wake, because this is, in the end, one of the oldest themes there is. The theme of consciousness against unconsciousness, of waking against the dream, and it is not new. Societies have always sleepwalked through shifts while functioning normally on the surface. The alarm ringing unheeded, the collective walking on in the comfortable dream of permanence, because the surface normality reassures, and the gradual shift produces no dramatic signal, and the dream is more comfortable than the waking. This is not new. What is new is only the specific circumstance, the particular structural shift the West is moving through, the fiscal and the monetary and the technological, with the alarm ringing on all of them, and the particular collective unconsciousness that leaves the alarm unheeded, and the particular fact that irrelevance is not the destination because the strengths are real, but that the unconscious squandering of those strengths is the genuine risk. You cannot wake the collective. That is the hard truth, and it is also, strangely, the liberating one. You cannot wake the West with an alarm, because a sleepificated does not wake to an alarm, and waiting for it to wake is futile. But you can wake yourself. That is entirely within your power. The internal act of coming to consciousness, of choosing to register the shift the collective is sleepwalking through, of waking from within while the collective walks on. The alarm is ringing, and whether you hear it, whether you wake to it, or fold it into the comfortable dream and walk on, is the one thing in your control. And the value of waking, of becoming conscious while the collective sleepwalks, invisible for a long time the way these things always are, through the stretch in which the surface normality still reassures, and the person who woke appears merely to be disturbed by an alarm that everyone else is comfortably sleeping through, reveals itself the way waking always reveals itself, which is slowly, in the quiet accumulation of decisions made in consciousness while the collective moves in the dream, and then suddenly, at the moment the shift finally becomes undeniable and the sleepwalking collective wakes all at once, abruptly and disoriented to a reality that the individual who woke early had been moving through calmly and consciously all along.